She was a witch who had the power to destroy a nation with ease, a witch of 300 years and the continent's one and only witch. However, she despised humans, so she lived out her days confined to the mountains. That was until one day when she came across a human in danger, and he desperately needed her help. The handsome young man knelt before her, crying and begging. She was amazed by his appearance, so she rescued him and followed him to his kingdom. Followed is an understatement. She protected, supported, and stayed by his side. Not only did she do all that, she also put him on the throne. But what awaited her in the end was brutal. The young man she had given her all to stabbed her, saying, "You told me remove anything that bothered me." She cried as she took her last breath, and just like that, she was eliminated by the only human she had trusted since becoming a witch. This lovely manhwa is titled The Wicked Little Princess. Fortunately, the essence of her life, her mana core, wasn't destroyed. So she was able to escape with only her soul, and it would take 10 years for her to regain her strength in the spiritual world. In the palace, the maids were wondering why the newborn baby wasn't crying. It wasn't normal. The witch, frowning as she was being held, thought to herself that she couldn't believe she was now a newborn baby. She had entered this body only because she was drawn to it. The maid, worried, asked if she should pat her bottom. They flipped her over and patted her bottom. She thought to herself angrily, saying they should respect her dignity as a witch. This situation was truly humiliating. At this point, the maids didn't know what to do because the baby was still motionless. One asked if she should summon a doctor, but the other replied that if they did that, His Majesty would learn of the situation. So she suggested they pat her one more time on the bottom, but the witch couldn't imagine going through that humiliation again. Left with no other choice, she pretended and cried out loud. The maids were overjoyed. They jumped up in relief, holding her tightly. She was disgusted by their touch, but her voice couldn't tell them to remove their filthy hands. She kept crying, asking in her mind who dared to touch her body. "Our pretty princess, please survive. You must not die," the maid said. And the baby wondered what nonsense she was spewing. Why would a witch die? At this time, the witch didn't know anything about the future that awaited her, and even if she had known, there was absolutely nothing she could have done anyway. Lying on her bed and facing the wall, all dressed in her wear, she wondered why all this had happened. She scowled, saying it was all because of that evil Rakus who betrayed her. Rakus was the youngest prince of the kingdom of Karel. Scorned by his brother, the crown prince, Rakus had been crossing the northern desert when he was attacked by assassins. He barely escaped with his life and eventually found his way to her mountains, where he knelt in front of her. It was as if she had been possessed by something back then. Love at first sight, as humans call it, that was exactly what she had felt, and she gave him everything, all her power and even the throne. But on the day he was supposed to ask her to marry him, there was no ring in sight. Instead, the body that should have worn the ring was pierced by a sword. She still couldn't believe she had trusted a human. She regretted it deeply, but it was too late now. Looking at herself in a baby's body, she felt it might actually be for the better. 10 years is a long time for humans, and it would be a long time for Rakus as well. At least now, she was in a body that would one day let her take revenge on him as soon as possible. Her face sparkled with smiles. Her motto in life was, "Revenge is best served hot." She held on to her teddy bear, imagining it to be Rakus, and whispered how she would destroy him no matter what. The maid walked in and, seeing Her Highness awake, asked if she was already up. She frowned, thinking to herself that she couldn't do anything now, since she still had to grow up a bit more. The maid asked if she'd like some yummy food and to have her diaper changed. The baby shook her head in disapproval, thinking to herself that the maid shouldn't touch her body. The maid was surprised by how she had shaken and asked if she really did understand what she was saying. Her Highness growled in her thoughts, "Of course I understand what she's saying. I'm not a dumb human baby, I'm a great witch." The maid smiled, saying she was indeed incredible, but she'd like her to act normal as if she wasn't even present because only then would she live long. The baby was confused. She wondered why the maid was suddenly saying this with such a disturbed expression. She questioned what kind of land she had been born into for the maid to speak like that. Goodness! What am I blabbing to you? Please stay still, I shall bring you your yummy food, the maid said. But Her Highness yelled, shouting that she refused to eat that tasteless garbage. The maid left immediately, saying she'd be back soon. Her lady thought to herself that she couldn't even understand what the maid was saying. Humans indeed are worthless. She wiggled, thinking it would be nice if she at least had her first mana circle. She clasped her hands, hoping to test and see how much mana this body possessed. The little witch shut her eyes calmly and did her little finding, only to open them in shock. She was surprised and couldn't believe it. It was impossible for a tiny body like this to already have 5 circles. She clenched her fists, thinking to herself that back when she was this age, she had only reached her 2nd circle before becoming a witch. So this body has genius-level abilities, she said, overwhelmed. She wondered proudly if she should just conquer the continent. The maid came back and was changing her diapers. She commented on how Her Highness didn't even cry during the process. She pouted, thinking to herself that she was a newborn baby who couldn't even speak properly. Her lady covered her face, thinking that if witches could die of embarrassment, she would have already died. The sky is quite clear. Shall we take a stroll? The maid asked, lifting her lady gently. She said it was safe in the palace, so it would be nice to go outside. Her lady stared at her, mumbling to herself, not understanding what she was trying to say. She wondered which land she was a princess of, but then again, all that mattered was that she was part of an imperial family, so who would dare hurt her? The maid walked through the hallway, telling her lady that this place was called the Dandelion Palace. All princes and princesses were born here, and like her, they must stay until the age of 5. After that, she would choose a sword and be assigned a palace, but that was far into the future. While her lady was trying to understand what she was saying, the maid stopped and told her to relax. The little witch yelled internally, demanding that she explain everything step by step. The maid smiled, asking why her lady was suddenly getting angry, and pleaded with her not to be upset for no reason. "Are you hungry, or do you need me to change your diapers?" she asked. But then, she suddenly paused, her expression turning curious and then frozen. "Your Majesty," she shouted as she bowed. Her lady thought to herself, is the Emperor here? She wondered if he was a magical swordsman. The Emperor was a tall young man with long silver hair, and he was handsome. Looking at him, her lady thought to herself that she had seen this kind of handsomeness before. She stared at him continuously, wondering where she had seen him, or was it that she would grow old and recognize him later? Is this guy even human? I've never sensed such an intense aura from anyone other than the dragon, she mumbled. The Emperor, looking at her lady's silver hair and red eyes, commented on it. The maid bowed and explained, saying she took after the former emperor. I think her blood runs the closest to the imperial bloodline. She has a great likeness to the great Askina, the maid explained. Her lady was surprised upon hearing the name Askina, wondering if it was the northern dragon she wasn't on good terms with. Why is that old geezer's name being mentioned? She asked, confused and angry. Hearing the dragon's name mentioned, the emperor asked if he should check whether it was actually true. The little witch flinched. The moment he touched her chest, she cried out because of the pain she felt. She wondered why it hurt and what exactly he could be doing. Not knowing how to stop the nonsense, she bit him on the front of his finger. The maid called out to her, but she didn't let go. Instead, she held on tightly. The maid called out to her, but she didn't let go. Instead, she held on tightly. Am I being slobbered on? He asked, and her lady's expression was furious. The maid apologized, saying the princess had made a mistake because she was still a baby, and begged him to forgive her with his generosity. A child that bites instead of crying, he stared at her. She mumbled to herself, what is he looking at? He laughed, saying it was indeed amusing and that it meant she could already choose a sword at this level. The maid was surprised and called out to His Majesty, reminding him that Her Highness was still very young and that her birthday hadn't even passed yet. The Emperor replied that she was able to fend off his strength, so she should be able to do it. Her lady reacted, and he took it as a sign of agreement. The emperor then named the princess Leona, saying he would observe whether her teeth would be those of a lion, the king of beasts, or just another trivial creature. "I hope you satisfy my expectations," he said to her lady, who was still frowning. Her Highness frowned, wondering why this guy was so strange, mumbling to herself that there were things he shouldn't be saying to children. Suddenly, she noticed the sheath on his waist. It looked familiar. She thought to herself that she knew it from somewhere. Her eyes widened in shock as she remembered. The sheath was made from the horns of a black dragon that had been defeated by humans. The hilt was crafted from the wings of the fairy queen, also conquered by humans. "No way, that can't be," she said, realizing which kingdom wielded such a weapon. She tried to assure herself it wasn't what she was thinking, they were probably just similar. The maid, noticing her unusual behavior, asked worriedly if she was all right. She apologized for bringing her outside instead of calling a doctor. "Tomorrow, you'll choose a sword. As it is the law of the empire, there's nothing else that can be done," the maid said sadly. The witch baby stared at her in confusion, and the maid went on and on about how she had become wrapped up in the fight for the throne. "Sword? Now fight for the throne," she echoed, wearing a shocked expression. She got chills instantly, asking herself if this was even possible. Out of all the empires in the world, there was only one where imperial descendants must choose a sword and enter the battle for succession. And if this really was that place, then the emperor was definitely that guy. A draconic strength that could only be felt from the emperor of that empire, silver hair and blue eyes. There was only one person who had all three traits. The maid then called her by the name Leona. "Leona von Hazes," the maid said, and her lady's heart began to race. The maid asked her to always keep this in mind. The baby witch was still stunned. She thought to herself, "I can't believe there's a chance I've been reborn as the daughter of the human who tried to eliminate me." She knew instantly that she was in serious trouble. The emperor of the Hazes Empire, a man who was bequeathed dragon blood and had transcended the laws of nature. Long ago, when she was a witch, they fought like cats and dogs. That was about 20 years ago. There had been a group of human merchants who attempted to pass through the mountains without her permission. Of course, she destroyed them. She was a witch, and the mountains were her territory. But those merchants weren't just from any land. They were from the Hazes Empire, the strongest empire on the continent. Worse still, they worked directly under the emperor. And that wasn't even the worst part. They just happened to be transporting a national treasure. So in the end, the emperor came to get her out of the way. If she hadn't abandoned her pride as a witch and escaped like a rat, even her soul would have been destroyed. After that, she never dared to even look in the direction of the Hazes Empire again. But now, she couldn't believe she had been reborn as that man's daughter. The maid was surprised to see her lady so angry and asked why she was boiling with frustration. Back in her room, Leona wondered how she could end up so unlucky. When she learned of everything, she even considered abandoning this body, because if that bastard found out who she truly was, that would really be the end of her. But then again, it would be such a shame to give up this fifth mana circle and the powerful lineage of this body. After all, only the strongest survive. It is said that the former emperor had 38 children. You must be wondering, what's the point of having so many children, right? Well, they're pitted against each other, until only one victor remains. The last surviving child becomes the emperor who rules over the continent. Leona thought to herself, so that ruthless man got rid of his 37 siblings to become the emperor. But she knew she couldn't give up. Only the strongest survive here. It's a world where people get rid of each other to move forward, and because of that, it's the perfect stage for a strong witch like her. She smiled excitedly. Judging by her happy expression, her maid could tell she was in a good mood. As the 12th princess of the empire, she became swept up in the fight for the throne. Normally, she would have been protected in the Dandelion Palace until she turned 5, but the emperor was going to make her stand in front of the swords. She didn't even know what he expected from a child who couldn't crawl yet. However, now she understood, she was being acknowledged by the very man who had once almost eliminated her. So no matter what, she must and will become the emperor. Her maid wondered and asked why she was laughing, not knowing her lady already had a plan in motion. Leona was held by her maid and brought before a large crowd. Her lady mumbled to herself, "There are hundreds of people here." Gazing at them, she thought to herself, "I must become emperor, destroy the kingdom of Karel which is ruled by Rakus, and after that, I'll conquer the continent." Leona was literally feeling on top of the world at that moment. Her lady, sitting majestically on the throne, thought to herself that she would do it all with this brilliant body. Her maid bowed beside her and said she could now choose her sword from among the people standing before her. She was surprised. She didn't know that choosing a sword didn't actually mean choosing a sword. It meant that, as a member of the imperial family, she would be choosing a subordinate. Leona noticed a lady dressed like a man peeking. She grinned. She had found the one. She pointed in that direction, making baby sounds. She thought to herself that there may be many people lined up here, but there was only one person she would choose. Everyone was surprised, especially a young man standing in a corner with green hair. He mumbled to himself. He had never imagined that woman would be chosen. He grinned, saying, His Majesty was right. Last night, when he met with His Majesty, he was told about the 12th princess, which had caught him by surprise. He had asked how His Majesty knew of her. He mumbled to himself, maybe he chanced upon her when he went to check on that thing buried in the Dandelion Palace. He had asked, what was she like? Do you think we can expect much from her? But His Majesty had been quiet. When he finally spoke, he simply said, watch her. That had confused him at the time, because this was the same man who told the first prince, considered the greatest genius in the universe, to devote himself more. The same man who showed contempt for the second prince, an ice magician, saying he was lacking. He also told the fourth prince, who was blessed by the sun god, and the sixth princess, a sorcerer, that they were useless. So he wondered, just how impressive can this 1-year-old princess be if all His Majesty told him was to watch her? But watching her now, he was overwhelmed. He even cancelled his meeting with the second prince for a good cause. He had gotten to see her choose that woman and witnessed how cute and lovely her face was. He gasped, wondering what he was even saying, but he couldn't deny it. She's so cute. Leona noticed him. When he turned, he couldn't catch his breath. Her cuteness had swept him off his feet. He felt like poking her cheek so badly. His men were surprised to see him on the floor and asked if he was okay. He got up and said he was fine, but when he turned back to look at her lady again, she was staring at him and smiling cutely. He couldn't hold it anymore, and fainted right there. No one understood what was going on, not even Leona. She frowned, wondering if he was being serious at this point. He was carried away, and she wondered who he even was. Then she remembered, he was that emperor's aide, the highest-level knight, Harriet Ulizer. After he devastated 5 ogre colonies in only half a day, he was nicknamed Knight of Ruin. The witch had fought him in the past, too, because he had impudently tried to trespass into her mountains, so she defeated him. Looking at him now, she could tell he was stronger than he had been back then. She wondered why he had fainted in the first place and why he was smiling stupidly at her. She sighed, saying, It's not like I care, I have more pressing matters at hand. Leona had chosen her sword, Cage Artperth, the strongest necromancer on the continent. Cage Artperth was said to be able to raise even the dead with her strength. As long as there were corpses, she had an infinite army at her fingertips, which made her difficult to deal with. That's why Leona felt she was the perfect guard. The stories about Cage had reached her even when she was holed up in the mountains. They said that while 5 mid-level knights were charging at her, she got rid of 20 wyverns and turned them into undead. Most people struggled to get rid of even 1 wyvern. She also ruined the kingdom of Jack, which had plotted to assassinate her. In a single day. There were many rumors like this. Cage was the center of so many tales, and naturally, Leona had always wanted to fight her, even just once. But sadly, that never happened. Which made sense, because Cage had never set foot in the mountains where Leona lived. But now, they had finally met. Isn't she just too lucky in this body? There was just one thing she didn't understand. How did Cage end up babysitting a young child? With a satisfied expression, Leona knew she was on the winning side. As long as Cage was with her, she'd be safe from assassins. Leona opened her arms happily, calling out to her. But Cage flinched, stepping back. Her lady got sad. Why is she stepping back? I didn't even do anything. She kept smiling, calling her in a baby tone, but Cage didn't come any closer. She wondered if she was sick or something. Why isn't she coming to me? Leona's expression began to change. She was getting really pissed. How dare she ignore my goodwill? She started sweating from stretching out too much but figured maybe it was just hot in the room or maybe her blood was boiling too. Cage wasn't saying a single word. She just stood there watching her. Finally, she came closer and held her hands. Leona grabbed tight but Cage let go. Ow. I'm just 1 year old, she cried sadly, with teary eyes. Cage let out a soft smile. Leona cursed at her tiny little body for not letting her speak her mind. Just wait until I get bigger. You're all. She said bitterly. Her maid rushed over, asking Cage sadly what the matter was. Leona thought to herself that Lynn, her maid, was the only one who truly understood her. I take back whatever I said about her being insignificant, she mumbled. Lynn told Cage she thought Her Highness was in pain and that she should let her go. Cage glanced at her but didn't say a word. After a while, a man walked in. On seeing the situation, he hummed. Cage grabbed him by the collar right in front of Her Highness, leaving her with a questioning expression. Her lady's face was practically saying, "Who on earth is this?" He cleared his throat, introducing himself as a healer. A healer? She wondered why a healer was here out of nowhere. Cage here is quiet and not very social, but I think she pulled me here to examine you, Your Highness, he said, scratching the back of his head. He asked Lynn if he could check Her Highness, and she nodded in approval. Leona thought to herself that Lynn was approving without even consulting her opinion, which just proves she's an unhelpful human being after all. The healer gently raised the baby's hands and performed his little magical inspection. He was shocked after examining her and quickly ordered for a priest to be summoned. Lynn, worried, asked what he meant, and he replied that she was going through a mana explosion. Leona was stunned, wondering if they were actually talking about her. She pressed her face and muttered that she was fine. So what on earth were they talking about? She glared at him, calling him stupid in her thoughts. Fifth circle mana is raging inside this small body, the healer confirmed. Leona now understood why he was saying all this nonsense, so he noticed. He claimed that someone must have injected the young lady with mana because there was no natural explanation for this, and if she wasn't treated right away, her life would be at risk. Oh my goodness, Your Highness. So that's why you've been sweating all day. Lynn exclaimed. Leona internally rolled her eyes, saying it was just because she was hot. After all, she was a fire witch. Lynn felt really bad for not noticing her lady's pain behind those earlier smiles. But Leona knew that all those smiles were simply because she was delighted at the thought of becoming emperor. They believed it must have been incredibly painful for her, but she didn't even cry. Leona wondered why they were making such a big deal over something she had possessed since birth. The healer asked if she was blessed by Askina, but she frowned in disgust. She didn't need that senile dragon's power to be strong. He offered to summon a doctor right away to get her treated, but Leona wasn't having it. She yelled internally, asking why no one seemed to understand her. After the doctor arrived and examined her, she confirmed that the baby could feel the mana, but that there was nothing wrong with her physically. However, she insisted the baby must get absolute rest and gave instructions to Cage. The doctor left, saying they should contact her if anything happened. Watching the little princess snore as she slept, Cage remembered the oath she swore to His Majesty, the Emperor, on the River of Death, an oath concerning the 12th princess. She thought to herself, she's small yet has great strength. She gently poked her cheek and smiled. A small bunny-like princess, one who will grow up strong and become a predator someday. The kind who doesn't run away, even when scared. She poked her again softly, thinking she couldn't believe she would be the one to protect her. The next morning, the palace was unusually hectic. The maids were busy, and she overheard talk about moving palaces. Normally, she should have stayed under the Dandelion Palace's protection until she turned 5, but now that she had entered the fight for the throne, she had to move to a new, assigned palace. Leona noticed Lin kept looking at her with that soft, pitiful expression. It was all because of the healer's diagnosis. Since the mana explosion incident, Lin had been keeping her close at all times, too concerned to let her out of sight. Her lady thought there was no need for that, not when she had Cage around. Leona raised her hands to draw Cage's attention, but, as usual, Cage looked away. Leona glared, thinking how strange it was. Cage always blushed when their eyes met but then turned away. Could it be that when I smile, my face looks scary? She wondered, holding her cheeks. Lin came over and asked if Her Highness was bored. Leona pointed at Cage, thinking to herself that she wasn't bored, she just meant that Cage kept moving away from her. Lin misunderstood, assuming she was talking about the room's decor. Shall I get you a toy? A rattle or a pacifier? She asked while shaking a toy in front of her. Leona immediately wailed in protest, screaming in her mind that she didn't need such things. She was a great witch, not a normal baby. Lin, flustered, apologized quickly as her lady thrashed about in rage. She walked to a drawer to try another toy, eventually pulling out a bunny doll with patched eyes. She brought it over and asked the princess if she liked it. A bunny? Leona thought. It's so dirty. It looks like it should have been thrown out long ago. But just then, she sensed something ominous from it. She mumbled to herself it wasn't a normal bunny. Lin, seeing her staring at it silently, smiled and assumed it was just too old and worn out for her. Leona suddenly grabbed it aggressively and declared it hers. Lin was confused, wondering why her lady was acting so feisty, but Leona hugged the bunny tightly, smiling. She didn't know why, but she could feel dark mana inside it. If she kept it close, maybe its mana would enter her body. She already had 5 circle mana, but the more, the merrier. Lin, happy to see her young lady so pleased, admired how cute she looked. Eventually, Leona fell asleep with the bunny close. Cage asked about the bunny, and Lin explained it had been brought from Her Highness's mother, the Republic of Aslan. Her mother used to play with it as a child too, and now her daughter was attached to it so quickly. It was a shame she couldn't see her mother at such a young age. Cage wondered silently if her mother was dead but didn't ask. Leona is at an age where she should feel the embrace of her parents, but she's all alone now, entering a fight for the throne, Lin said sadly. Cage replied, don't pity the princess. She'll be strong. Lin responded, even if she'll be strong one day, that doesn't mean she's strong now. Cage gently assured her, I'll protect her, no matter what. Lin thanked her. Cage smiled and poked the baby's cheek as they both watched Her Highness sleep peacefully. It was night, and Her Highness was being moved to her new palace. Black Rose Palace? Ridiculous, Cage said angrily, turning to Lin. Why is her lady being brought here? The maid couldn't reply, she only stammered nervously. Cage continued ranting, reminding her that this place was the grave of a dead imperial family. How could they even bring a baby here? Lin was shaking, finding it hard to speak. Leona began crying, thinking to herself, how could she be so scared of Cage, who isn't even talking properly? Cage ordered the maid, go tell the emperor now. This is such unfair treatment. Lin shouted, no, and blocked her way immediately. She began explaining herself, saying she was the one who actually requested for Her Highness to be brought to the Black Rose Palace. Cage was stunned. Have you lost your mind or something? She asked, pointing at the palace. What human in their right senses would choose such an abandoned place? Lin shouted back, it was Her Highness's last wish. The princess said I must bring Her Highness to this place no matter what, and I had no other choice. I didn't like it either, but I had to honor her last wish, she explained. Cage went silent for a moment, then suddenly gave her a thumbs up. If that's the case, then it's a brilliant palace. I approve. Leona gazed at her, completely confused, and didn't say a word. She was curious about what kind of place this palace really was. As they entered the palace, Lin apologized for taking so long to tell her the truth. She explained that she had been torn about whether or not to follow the late princess's wish, but if they truly found the place unbearable, she would ask His Majesty again. Hearing them speak like this, Leona wondered, how bad could this place be for them to be acting this way? Once inside the Black Rose Palace, Her Highness looked around and thought to herself, this place actually looks haunted. It'd be weirder if there weren't any ghosts. It made her feel like the mother of the body she now possessed must have been a strange human. Why would she request this kind of place for her own daughter in her will? As they moved further in, Leona's eyes widened. She was surprised by how intense the manna was. It was crazy. It was the same manna she had sensed coming from the bunny. At this point, Leona was excited. She swung her arms happily, she couldn't wait to enter. Could there be something hidden in this palace? She wondered. The closer they got, the thicker the manna became. She also wondered why Cage wasn't reacting. If I, with fifth circle manna, can sense this much, then she can too. So why isn't she affected? Just then, a strange magical interference swept through the air. Her lady was shocked to see the magic wind. Suddenly, they heard a voice. Cage and Lin, oddly, didn't seem surprised at all. It was a little boy with blonde hair. She looks like she'd die even without me trying to kill her. So this is who I'm supposed to fight against for the throne? He asked spitefully. Leona narrowed her eyes. Who the earth is this little Emperor Mini-Me? Watching how he sulked, she mumbled that he was slow-witted, but she could still tell he had come to threaten her. Hiya! Her lady shouted angrily, trying to say go away. He blinked, confused, not understanding a thing she just said. Leona repeated herself more aggressively, trying to get him to leave immediately, mentally threatening to crush him if only she were bigger. What is this? He muttered, tilting his head. Her lady's expression was firm. It was obvious she wasn't about to be intimidated. At that moment, she looked just like the little bunny clutched in her arms. A few days ago, Harriet went to His Majesty's office. He was furious. Were you behind it? He asked, storming in. His Majesty, with his usual nonchalant expression, didn't say a word. Harriet tried to keep his cool, reminding himself that he wasn't afraid of speaking his mind. Are you choosing to feign ignorance about what the servants are saying regarding Princess Leona's manna explosion? If Cage hadn't stepped in, she could have died. At that, His Majesty finally acknowledged it. The little baby chose the necromancer Cage as her sword, he said. She's living up to my expectations. Watching His Majesty smile, Harriet's irritation deepened. How can you be smiling in this situation? What exactly are you getting at? His Majesty asked flatly. I want to confirm whether you were the one who put all that manna in her. His Majesty looked at Harriet and said coolly, there's no need for me to kill my own child with my own hands. She has chosen her sword. Her life is no longer mine to protect. It's now in the hands of the other princes and princesses. That's exactly my problem. Harriet snapped. How could you leave such an adorable, lovely little princess unprotected? You left her to die. Unprotected? His Majesty echoed with emphasis. Harriet clenched his fists. She's the only adorable, lovely person in this entire imperial palace, which is swarming with horrid wolves. You saw her too, and still, you threw her into this bloodthirsty battle? His Majesty let out a hum. I've already bestowed the Black Rose Palace to the princess. Harriet froze. You mean you actually agreed to throw her into that place? The same Black Rose Palace where the first prince of the last generation herded the imperial family members who surrendered their rights to the throne and wiped them out. I'm sure the old markings are still there. Your Majesty, you're going too far. What if Her Highness dies? Then that is her fate, His Majesty replied calmly. You heartless man, Harriet fought back tears, but His Majesty remained unmoved. Why are you questioning my judgment? He asked. I can't believe I've kept someone like you by my side. Harriet turned away, wiping his face. You'll never find another aide like me, he said. I've made my decision, I will protect Her Highness. With that, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Right outside the office stood the blonde-haired prince, arms folded, eavesdropping. So it was Cage first, and now Harriet, too, he muttered. All this for the 12th princess, who isn't even a year old. This is going too far. Inside the office, His Majesty chuckled at the whole situation. He seemed amused. Just who is this 12th princess? The prince wondered. Why are Harriet and His Majesty so interested in her? That was how he decided he'd go see her himself. And if she turned out to be nothing special, he'd kill her. But now, seeing her lady in person, he was stunned. So this is the one they've all been talking about? Just a small, adorable creature. She was as cute as a bunny. He could feel his heart pounding. That Harriet, he didn't even describe her cuteness properly. Cage noticed him. Your Highness, what are you doing here? Do I need a reason to stop by? He replied, dodging the question. Because right now, I don't have one. You could be here to threaten her, Cage said, narrowing her eyes. What? How could you accuse me of such a thing? When did I ever? He began ranting before she could continue. She glared at him. Such an impudent prince. Then he noticed what her lady was holding. Why is she holding such a shabby doll? She may be a baby, but how could anyone give her that old thing? He demanded they throw it away and replace it immediately. The thought struck him he'd give her a new one himself. Surely she'd be happy. He chuckled at the idea until Lin cut in, informing him that the doll belonged to the princess's late mother. He paused, stunned, unable to find the words. She's so young. How could she even know to hold on to it like that? Lin smiled, while Leona watched silently. The prince couldn't take it. My heart's beating out of my chest. She's too cute. She's small, cute, and deserving of pity, he shouted. Cage nodded in agreement. Shut up, he snapped at her. He turned to her lady, who tilted her head with a questioning look. Don't live a pitiful life, okay? He said softly, genuinely concerned. His words carried a blessing that fluttered through the air. It's the sun god's blessing, he added proudly. Even though you're clearly undeserving of it. Leona's eyes widened. Did he just say? Sun god? Lin leaned down with a smile. That was your brother Nickel. He's blessed you with the power of the sun god. Leona smiled instantly, reaching out her tiny hands to him. Nickel flinched. Are babies always this cute? Even when I was a baby he doubted if he was this cute. Then, suddenly snapping back to his arrogant self, he announced, I'll come back again. You better keep the doors open. With that, he walked out. They all watched him leave with a relieved sigh. Lock the doors, Cage ordered immediately. Gladly, Lin agreed. Meanwhile, the little witch thought to herself, seems like he gave me a blessing that'll speed up my growth. That's a good thing. But Nickel or whatever his name is, he's annoying. I already dislike humans, and I really dislike annoying ones. I hope no more annoying guys come over here.